All right. Welcome back, everyone, for the second episode. Today, we will be discussing Buddhism. It's an important teaching I've learned. It's not up there with the many of them. It's just a good realization, something to have in the back of your mind. So, Buddhism is, very simply put, the realization of suffering. And there are four noble truths of Buddhism. I don't remember them word for word, but it goes something like the truth of suffering, the truth of the beginning of suffering, the truth of the path to suffering, and the truth of the path to the end of suffering. And so this is a very simple idea, is that desire causes all of our suffering, because you will either have to suffer to get it, or you will suffer when you lose it or don't get it, right? So it could be that you get it and then you lose it. So it's like, no matter what, because we're all going to die, because everything's going to fade away, right? We were all kicked off into the void the second that we were born. You're going to lose everything. You're going to lose yourself, you're going to lose your body, you're going to lose your friends, your family, everything. And it sucks and it sounds sad originally, but once you realize this and you get kind of accustomed to it, comfortable to it, you realize that if everything feels this sort of suffering, then you're not in it alone. You're in it with everything else, right? The trees, the birds, the bees, everything's going to die eventually. And so we're all doomed to the void, essentially. And so there's no fear in that, you know. What is the fear if we're all going to do the same thing, right? Can't be that bad. And so, once you realize this, right, and this is, again, it's very similar to Taoism. It's like realizing that the black comes with the white, and you can't have suffering, you can't have good without any suffering. It's just a little more desperate. And so Buddhism splits off into two main ideas, right, which is Jiriki and Tariki. I'm not sure I'm saying those right, but this one is essentially my will be done, and this one is thy will be done. So I don't really associate much with this one, simply because it's very hopeless. I just don't like the idea that there is a will other than our own that controls everything, and that we don't have a choice or a chance in the matter. And so I study mostly Jiriki, which is, I think there's only one type of Tariki, and there's multiple types of Jiriki, which is like Mahayana Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, stuff like that. And so this is essentially like fate, right? So we all have, like, just give up. Your hand is in the, like, your fate is in other hands, essentially. And so there's nothing both to be done and nothing to worry about. Now, it's good in theory, right? It's good in theory, but then you see people who believe that my will be done, and I feel like they accomplish much more than thy will be done. And I also think that thy will be done can also, over time, turn into a kind of nihilism, because you will start to think, I don't have to work hard, I don't have to suffer, I don't have to bear any pain, because that will be done, God has a plan, that kind of thing, where you just kind of trust the infinite in a way that you don't produce anything for or of yourself. So, back to my will be done. This is essentially like, you're bound to suffer, but you can navigate the road, right? So, you're in a plane, essentially. It's bound to crash. There's no landing strip, right? You're going to crash, which is death. But the good news is you're the pilot, right? So you can see all that you want to see and fly all that where you want to fly with your given time. And you get that choice. So that's why I like this Jiriki, this my will be done, because I feel like also they kind of do meet in the middle here in most of the practices across Jiriki, at least, where it's, if you take if you exercise this, my will be done, right? And you suffer for progress, like we explained in the last episode, right? You go to the gym, you suffer a little bit, you get a lot of progress. You suffer a little bit, you get more progress. You suffer a little bit, you get more progress. So this is like, essentially it's like you're willing to suffer, the universe is going to meet you halfway and pay you back for that suffering. Because you can't stay on the black side. You can't just suffer, you know? You will never just suffer unless like you suffer and then you die and then that was the end of your life. But if you suffer and you just keep pushing, eventually, no matter how long it takes, you're going to one day see peace of the same magnitude in which you saw suffering. And so all suffering is not pointless, right? It has a point and it has a value in the sense that it's going to just slingshot you in the other direction. And there's a good quote in the Tao Te Ching about this that says, one of the lines is just that man may know heaven without ever leaving his room. And so this is because heaven exists in all things. And when you stay only in your room, it's all that you know, right? So if all that you know is heaven, is God, is love, is the eternal thing, then all that, when you shrink down all that you know, it's like these very few things. It's easy to point out God, it's easy to see, right? You then consider when you have the entire world. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but I think Jiriki uses Tariki just in a more willful way, a more willful act. So now, despite these two teachings, I'm not sure about Tariki. The end goal is nirvana, right? This is peace. This is attainment. This is the enlightened state. This is Satori. I think it's in Japanese Zen Buddhism. It's called Satori, which means sudden awakening. Nirvana, broken down, means desperate, essentially. Nirvana means desperate. We break this down. It is an action, actually. It is to despirate, which is to breathe out. That's it. That's all it is. The enlightened state. I did that last episode too. The enlightened state is just a breath out. It's just relaxing and saying, oh, I'm going to be okay. Because if I'm suffering, I will eventually end up in a good spot. And if I'm in a good spot, there is no reason to now cause suffering, right? And I remember the first time I heard this broken down, it blew my mind. Because when you hear of nirvana, when you hear of satori, when you hear of enlightenment, you think of some great, grand thing. It's not that at all. It's just a realization that you and everything you know is doomed to the void. That's it. That's it. And that you're okay in that thing. You're alive. You have some time, right? And some will. And so that's it. It's just to breathe out. And boom, you're enlightened. Right? How easy is that? And something happens when you breathe out, when you despirate, when you relax, when you relieve that tension that you've caused yourself. And it is that everything seems so clear, right? All of a sudden, your goals, your wants, your needs, your desires, you see them for their suffering, right? So, originally, you would just see the blackfish, right? So if you were suffering, you would only notice that you're suffering. And if you were good, you would only see that you're good. But when you do this kind of experiment, you feel this kind of way, when you're in a state of nirvana, you realize that they come hand in hand. And so you see, okay, I desire to be, we're going to redraw this good, bad line again. So you say, I aspire to be here, okay? So you realize, okay, what do I have to do to get there, right? Because this is just a point in all of this. So where you want to be is just, think of it like using suffering as like a map to where you want to succeed, to the area in which you want to succeed. So I want to get here, right? So I suffer a lot, we get here. This is the same thing I did last time. You suffer more, we get here. You suffer again, finally reach that point that we wanted to. But it was only through venturing so far into this side that we manage to reach up here. Because again, they go hand in hand. They're not fighting, they are dancing. Right? And the faster this one goes, the faster this one will go. Right? They act in unison. Like those two sticks, right? The second one falls, the other falls with it. But if you raise one up, and if you make one purposefully strong in your life, the other will come just as quickly and just as strong. And it's the same thing that we did yesterday. So if you aim for good, you just waste your time, you just try and be happy all the time. See, and I think when you strive to be happy, you end up sad. But when you strive to be proud, you end up happy. And that's a very interesting concept because we think in our lives that we should chase happiness, right? But you're chasing something. It's like you're running up a hill and there's a cliff on the other side, right? Like there's nothing there for you but falling, right? Because the more you suffer, or the more you are happy over time, like, because suffering is naturally, it's what we said about desire. Desire is suffering, right? So in order to desire, you must suffer by either getting it or losing it. And so I'm trying to think of how to word this. It's a very interesting concept here. So when we chase good, all we're really chasing is the fall right after that, right? Because if you chase this pinnacle, you won't really notice when you just fall. But if you chase this suffering, you'll see when it gets good. So you'll be able to tell the difference because you don't really desire to suffer. That's the thing about our will, is that we don't desire to suffer, but we do it in order to be happy. Right? So this is what pride is you take pride in, let's say you went to the gym every day for a month, right? There's a lot of pride in that because you suffered so much. And because you suffered so much, there's a lot of progress in that. And when progress comes, happiness comes, right? And so when you intentionally veer off into this bad, into the, when you make these decisions that you don't necessarily want to do them, right? Maybe you don't want to read, or you don't want to do your homework, or you don't want to do school, you don't want to do work, you don't want to go to the gym. No one wants to do all these things. They're not fun. They're suffering. They're intentional suffering so that you might see your potential. And so, yeah, I don't have much for this one. I think that's about it. Because it's what Buddhism is, the state of Buddhism, right? What we desire to reach, how to use it in real life. So don't be afraid of suffering. Don't hate suffering. See it as, I'm on the way up. And if you're not on the way up and you're on the way down, you're going to come up eventually. Right? So, yeah, there's no reason ever to be afraid. Be sad. Just relax. Breathe out. Despirate. Everything's cool. Everything's good. There's nothing to worry about. And so these two teachings really give us the nature of the Tao, really, of the moment. Like there is a kindness to it and a calmness to it. But at the same time, it is the base of all things which grow. And you must come to understand it if you really want growth, if you really want, if you really want happiness in your life, you must first chase pride, right? It's interesting. It's an interesting predicament because for some reason, we can't just start at the good and stay in the good. It eventually is going to get worse and worse and worse because reality is suffering. And so I think that this underlying reality of suffering is very important because the Taoist way doesn't really mention that too often. And so you might think that you can just get away with, and you can get away with just being happy, but you'll never have anything to be proud of, right? And I think eventually if you just chase being happy your whole life, because we live in a world where currency is the necessity, you will kind of doom your children, right? So you need to work hard, you need to have pride, you need to have things that you're proud of so that your children can carry those things on and continue to reach higher heights rather than lower lows, right? And just swimming back to the top, with some temporary feeling. And right now, I feel like for a lot of us, actually, this is a great episode to talk about this. I feel like social media is, for a lot of us, that little bit of good, right? And so consider as we go down that time passes on, right? So you spend 8 hours a day on TikTok, right? You didn't get shit done. Now you have laundry to do, right? We're just gonna put out. So you go back, you get on TikTok, you feel good for a little bit, you get on Instagram, you got a DM or something, so you feel a little happier, right? Oh my God, someone likes me. Boom, you didn't do shit that day either. So now you don't have laundry and you didn't go to the gym for 2 days now. So it's like you're just piling on your suffering by ignoring the fact that you need to suffer to gain things. And you can carry on like this. Absolutely. You can just suffer and get unhealthy and get, lose your money, and you can do this. This is an option. But who the fuck would want to do that? Like, we gotta do something with our lives. For our kids. I also was presented. This is kind of off topic, but we're gonna keep going with it. I was presented the idea of how many people it took you to get here. So, there's you, right? There's your parents, right? And then there's their parents. And each of those parents also has parents. So we go, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 generations back. And there's already been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 people. There's been 8 people. Just 4 generations. If you add them all up, just back 4 generations, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 14 people. Because you didn't die yet, but. And your parents are probably alive as well if you're watching this. So, my point is that, and you can just keep going. This could go all the way down this hole. Like, there have been so many people who have died, who have given up their lives, who have worked hard, who have been disciplined, who have existed in pride, because we also don't think of how easy the world is today and how relieved we are of suffering. Because all we have to do is go to work and get paid, buy food. It's kind of easy compared to having to get a hunt for food. Right? There's not, it's like, well, and maybe that was easier than working an 8-hour shift at wherever you work, right? The oil rig, let's say, that's pretty tough, but you're getting paid well. So it's like, you got to consider how much suffering it took for you to get here. And if you're just going to coast off of that, your children are going to suffer even more. You're going to be adding on to that. And I think this is that karmic relationship that is also talked about in Buddhism a lot that I didn't mention too much. But I think that karmic relationship is essentially how much your parents suffered for you and how much you will suffer for your kids. So you have a chance to really change around the nature of your family name, because all these people, they have the same name, right? Well, not all of them, but they came from it's the same family, it's the same tree of people, and you could be the best person in that. You could be the most provided person. You could be the person who suffered the most, maybe, because again, times have been hard before this, but it's like you should strive to be that. You should strive to be the person who suffers so that your kids can prosper, and then teach this to your kids so that also they can understand that they need to suffer for their kids to prosper. And that is how I think you create generational wealth, is you teach those beneath you how to suffer, how to get the work done and get the work in, because it's the only way to be good. You can't just start good, or you'll crash. We saw that. Okay. So yeah, I got a little passionate there at the end, but that is all we have for the episode. Short episode. I'm actually not sure what the next one will be on. It might be on. I've got a couple ideas bouncing around. Be excited for. I'm going to make a Patreon soon enough where you'll be able to insert ideas you want me to talk about, or maybe we'll have like a live discussion thing, something like that. But it coming soon, before episode 10, hopefully. So yeah, over and out. That's it for episode 2.